Hello everyone, Soberoni of G&A Reviews here with a servant spotlight for the best pink-haired berserker, Frankenstein. We'll be going over her stats and skills, as well as going over pointers on how to utilize her effectively, and an overall grade comparing her to how she stacks up to the other 4-star servants. I also have a spotlight up for the other New London servant, Mordred, so do check that out, it's linked in the description below, right after this video. Now, on to Fran's stats. Fran has a max HP of 10,687, which is above average among 4-star berserkers, but overall is very low when compared to the other 4-star servants. And her 9,441 max attack is low when compared to the other 4-star berserkers, but above average when compared to 4 stars in general. Taking a look at her skills, her first skill is Galvanism rank B, which increases Noble Phantasm gain for 3 turns between 25 to 45%, depending on level. Her second skill is Grief of a Hollow Lifeform rank D, which has a 60% chance to stun a single target and decreases their defense for 1 turn between 10 to 20%, depending on level. That can be strengthened through an interlude, which increases the defense debuff to between 20 to 30%, depending on level. And finally, her last skill is Overload rank C, which increases Noble Phantasm strength between 20 to 30% for 1 turn, depending on level, and inflicts burn to herself for 5 turns, doing 300 damage per turn. Taking a look at her passives, she has Madness Enhancement rank D, which increases Buster card effectiveness by 4%. And moving on to her deck and Noble Phantasm, Fran has a semi-Buster deck with Quick Arts, Buster, 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 but a quick Noble Phantasm. Her Noble Phantasm is Blasted Tree, which deals a really powerful attack to all enemies with between a 700% to 1100% damage modifier, depending on level. It also decreases the critical hit rate of all enemies for 3 turns, between 10 to 30%, depending on overcharge, and it inflicts a stun on Fran for 2 turns. This Noble Phantasm can be upgraded via an interlude, which will increase the damage modifier between 900 to 1300% and increase the critical hit rate debuff to between 20 to 40%. Taking a closer look at her cards, we see that her quick card hits twice, her arts card hits twice, her buster hits once, and her extra attack hits 3 times. She has a Noble Phantasm gain rate of 0.83% and a star rate of 4.9%. She's bad at both star generating and Noble Phantasm gain, just due to the low hits on her cards and having a 3 buster card deck. So I do like to start off these reviews positively whenever possible, so let's focus on some of Fran's best traits. For one, she's cute as a button, and hopefully Aniplex will leave in her grunting, and she also has some interesting skills. Galvanism rank B is one of the best pure Noble Phantasm gain skills in the game. A 45% increase in Noble Phantasm gain is pretty huge. If she lands her arts card while this skill is active, she can really charge her Noble Phantasm gauge a fair bit, especially if it crits. And her second skill, Grief of a Hollow Lifeform, gives her access to a stun, which is rare on berserkers, and can lower an enemy's defense considerably. And finally, her last skill, Overload, can give her Noble Phantasm a good buff despite the demerit, which really isn't all that bad. And her Noble Phantasm itself is also capable of some heavy damage, even more so than Tamamo Cat's, making her pretty good at taking care of small enemy mobs and farming, provided that you can charge her Noble Phantasm. And that's about where all the positives end. Unfortunately, Fran suffers from a lot of problems. For one thing, while Galvanism itself is a good skill, it does extremely little for a berserker with just 1 arts card. It's far better to play to your strengths than to bandage a weakness, and something that cleared debuffs or increased her attack would have just been far better on her. In addition, the stun chance on her second skill is low, so it's very unreliable, and while the demerit on her third skill isn't that bad, the skill itself isn't good enough to even warrant having a demerit. For example, Tamamo Cat has a better version of this buff in Monstrous Strength, and that doesn't have any demerit whatsoever, so it just feels weird to have this burn damage effect tacked onto a skill that would otherwise just be okay. As it stands though, damage is a berserker's bread and butter, so you do want to max out Overload first, followed by Grief of a Hollow Lifeform, if only for that really good defense down, and finally Galvanism, since that doesn't really help that much. Speaking of unnecessary demerits, perhaps the biggest issue with Fran is that huge 2-turn stun on her Noble Phantasm. Her Noble Phantasm damage is good, but it's not that good. I have a theory that the designers of this game early on thought that AoE berserkers would be super OP and single target berserkers would be balanced, so they added all these unnecessary drawbacks to the AoE berserkers, yet Kentoki and Herc were given free reign to destroy the game. And that's a good summation of Fran. Any positive that she has is balanced out by a big drawback. She has a good Noble Phantasm gain skill but no arts cards. She has a good defense down skill but an unreliable stun. She has a decent Noble Phantasm damage buff but an unnecessary demerit attached to it. And she has a good AoE Noble Phantasm, but it has a crazy harsh 2-turn self-stun on it. And the final straw is just a bad mismatched deck. 3 Buster cards and a quick Noble Phantasm doesn't work on non-crit berserkers. It works on Lancelot because he has a quick Noble Phantasm that produces a ton of stars that he can then collect with his skills. Fran doesn't have that going for her, so the deck is just a huge drawback, and a Buster Noble Phantasm would have been infinitely better. As with all berserkers, Fran is fragile and needs a babysitter, so keeping her alive is your first priority, especially since she lacks a dodge or any other survival skills. Hans and David work well since they can keep her alive and buff her. Media Lily, George, Mosh, and Leonidas are other great survival options with their heals, taunts, and defense buffing skills, but they won't provide much in the way of attack buffs. For that, you're better off with Waver, Liz, or Caesar, and if you really want to go all in on Fran, you can pair her with Skahawk or Atlanta. They won't provide any protection at all, but they do have the best quick buffs in the game, so they can really up your Noble Phantasm damage. And Fran's Craft Essence is a way to become human. It increases the quick card effectiveness of all allies by 15%. Again, this isn't a bad Craft Essence by itself, but it's just better to give her a Craft Essence that will increase her own damage as much as possible. So go with Halloween Princess, Heaven's Field, or Imaginary Around. All of them will increase her Noble Phantasm damage considerably. After Party Order is another good choice since it alleviates some of the burden of her mixed deck. And of course, Kaleidoscope for farming as always. Overall, I won't say Fran is useless. She does function decently as a farming berserker. She's nowhere near as strong as Lancelot, so don't expect her to carry your team in a challenge quest. But she's marginally better than Tamamo Cat. And despite her drawbacks, her Noble Phantasm is pretty strong, so she can deal a lot of damage even to a group of enemy servants. On the other hand, as mentioned, she's loaded with demerits, and the stun on her Noble Phantasm is particularly bad. And when it comes to the titans that are the 4-star berserkers, she's greatly overshadowed and suffers from the whole anything she can do, someone else can do 100 times better thing. That's why I'm giving her a C ranking. In my book, that means she meets the bare minimum requirements to be called a 4-star, and she's about on par, if not a little behind, the top tier 3-star berserkers like Lubu and Kyohime. She's definitely in need of massive improvements, but if you do have her, you can make her work. And those are my thoughts on Fran. Sometimes it's just not fair, guys. Fran deserves so much better, but all we can do is just wait another 2 years before she finally gets the justice that she deserves. I want you guys to see how fast Fran's Noble Phantasm gauge fills up, especially if any of these crit. If she crits right now, she's getting 100%. Yep. That Noble Phantasm gauge, though. Well, let me know what you guys think of her in the comments below, and if you are like me and love her so much that you just plan on rolling for her anyway, let me know that too. Also, please do check out the Mordred Spotlight, also up on the channel today and linked in the description. And don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and consider subscribing if you really enjoyed the video. And if you haven't already, do join the party at our Discord and follow us on Twitter. And with all that said, I'll see you all in the next Servant Spotlight. Sobro and out. Later.